Welcome to the Nurture Network podcast, where motherhood meets transformation. I'm Jess Baldenhofer, certified parent coach, educator, and mom on a mission to help you move beyond overwhelm and create a deeper connection with your kids and yourself. Each episode is packed with real tools, relatable stories, and the support you deserve. Let's dive in and take another step toward the peaceful, fulfilling parenting journey you've been searching for. Welcome back to the Nurture Network. I am so excited today because I get to have a wonderful conversation with someone I recently met who is such an expert. I'm joined by Arielle Kempler, a trauma-informed psychotherapist specializing in EMDR and sensory motor psychotherapy. Arielle works with parents and caregivers to better understand their nervous systems, navigate the emotional weight of parenting in everyday life, and break patterns that no longer serve them. Her work is rooted in the belief that when we learn to care for ourselves with the same compassion we offer our children, we become more present, more connected, and more capable of raising emotionally healthy kids. So I'm so excited to dive into this conversation because I think this is one every parent needs to hear. So welcome, Arielle.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to get into it as well. It's something that I am passionate about. It's something that, as a mom, I feel, so it's something I really like talking about as well.
Thank you. Well, thanks for being here. And I love that you started with that idea because, it is such an interesting dynamic, us as providers for families and also mothers ourselves, and how we kind of go back and forth between those dynamics and learn from both places. So I really kind of wanted to start our conversation off on like a very real place today in terms of a lot of the things that I hear from mothers in terms of this push and pull between wanting to learn tools and skills for supporting their children while at the same time having this awareness that their own stuff affects the relationship, but they are pulled towards the latter because they're in survival mode usually, right? Like a lot of mothers feel really burnt out, overwhelmed. Kids are just like bouncing off the walls. And what can I do to kind of teach them new skills and create cooperation? But also having this awareness that their own experience matters, but kind of shoving that to the side sometimes. So can you speak a little bit about in your work, what you see come up around this push and pull of me versus them versus the relationship, and kind of how you kind of advise your patients on moving forward in that kind of thinking?
Right. Well, it's something that I see as well, something that I also experience as a mom, right? This idea of I want, to give my kids tools, but these are tools that sometimes we don't have ourselves, right? It's like trying to teach someone how to play basketball and you don't actually know how to play basketball, right? You can like watch a bunch of videos, you can read a bunch of things, but if you've not learned what it feels like to throw the ball or dribble the ball, you're not going to necessarily know how to tell someone else what it feels like. Right. And so that's kind of my framework is a lot of us come from families and parents who didn't know how to regulate, right? Who didn't know about emotional intelligence, right? Who, were grin and bear it parents. Well, I'm suffering. That's what motherhood is, right? And because of that, didn't really teach us what emotional regulation was, right? So we're walking around the world not knowing what emotional regulation is. And now we have these kids, especially big feelings kids, and we are saying, oh, I need them to regulate their emotions. And yet we don't know that as well. And oftentimes just not aware of it, right? Because as moms, especially, there's this idea of I'm going to live for my kids and not for me. Right. It matters what my kid feels. It doesn't matter what I feel. Oh, I'm going to skip this meal and that meal, and I'm not going to take a shower today. And I'm going to move things around and not have any free time because it matters what my kids have. And while to an extent, maybe that's needed, right? You can't necessarily do everything for yourself and everything for your kids. These all have impacts, right? And so then you're left ignoring your body, ignoring your needs, ignoring your own emotions. And then we're not modeling for our kids how to how to do emotional regulation, right? And so we're coming at it from a place of, I don't know anything about this for myself. I'm not aware of it. I don't know how to handle my own emotions. And yet I'm expecting my kids to. It's really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I often say in speaking with mothers that like our generation of mothers almost has this hyper challenge, right? Of kind of reparenting ourselves, doing some of this work ourselves, and while also trying to teach it to our children. So when mothers are feeling like overwhelmed with the idea of doing all of that, it's really understandable because trying to teach someone basketball when you've never been taught basketball or while you're learning basketball is very difficult. It's much easier to be a master of basketball and then try to teach it, right? To use your analogy. So, what do you think is like sort of that point where mothers are like experiencing their own emotions and experiencing their child's emotions and thinking to themselves, like, if they're having emotions or if I'm having big emotions, there's something wrong or there's something that needs to be fixed. So, how do you kind of talk through that with your patients or get them started on thinking about how that shows up for themselves?
Absolutely. And I will say also is that we are talking about the parent and child relationship, but this is really person to person. When we think about reactions to things, I would say, and this is maybe a bold statement, that 85 to 95% of our reactions have to do what's going on inside rather than what's going on outside, right? So someone says something, it gets filtered through our own view and our own mind, and then we react to it, right? So, I give this example a lot and it says a lot about me, but, I remember one time I was feeling so overwhelmed, so stressed, I felt like I wasn't doing anything right. And my husband, bless him, like emptied the dishwasher for me, right? It's something that I normally do. He did it. He's like, hey, babe, I emptied the dishwasher. Now, normally people would be like, oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. But what happened is I went into my own thinking and I was like, I failed as a wife. I should have been able to do this. Why does he have to do everything? He's working, he's doing this. And now he did the dishwasher. And now look at me, I'm a failure, right? Which was not what was happening. It was filtered through my own perspective. So all that is to say, when our kids are reacting, it's really hard for us to not filter through our own perspective, right? To not filter through our own experiences. So that I think is the first thing, is that you're having emotions while your kids are having emotions because you're human and your emotions may be very deep, right? Just like your kids' emotions are very deep. And so that's the first thing. And then, I was talking to a client the other day and she was telling me how she's been really stressed. There's a lot of things going on. And her daughter, rightfully so, because she's 3, is having big emotions about a lot of things. And she got to the point where I think she said that her daughter like hit her younger daughter or something. And she had a big emotion. The mom said she screamed and she goes, I was like, I know I shouldn't do this. I know I shouldn't scream in front of my kid. Like, I know it's not the right thing to do. Instagram says that you should enjoy your kids or, what is your kid experiencing here? And me and her stopped. And I said, but what were you experiencing here? Right? Like, and why can't you experience it? Why can't your daughter see you get angry? Sure, maybe we don't want to yell and scream. It is kind of natural, right? We kind of do it. But why can't you have an emotion towards your kid? Why can't you say, you know what, mommy got really angry, right? I think I'm going to need to like take some time to calm down. Maybe I'm going to listen to some music. Can we listen to music together? Or, something like that. Because what happens is that when we recognize, oh, I'm mad, as soon as we validate the feeling, it feels like it has more control. When we don't validate the feeling or we push it down, it feels like something we don't have control over. And it's just something that we're working to not have there. And it's just another layer of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're making me think of, first of all, I've heard something similar so many times too, where there's almost this sort of punishing thing that we do to ourselves as mothers, which is to say, why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this, as opposed to what you did, which is guiding her to understand how she was feeling and maybe even sit in the feeling for, what do they say, 90 seconds, so that you can actually contextualize it, name it, move through it, regulate it. But what we do is we tell ourselves the behavior of the yelling is not okay. And therefore, I put it in a bag with all the feelings and I just bury that. Right. And then next time I try hard to not yell. But the burying part is the part that keeps us in the cycle, right? Because we're just taking all the feelings, the shame and the guilt around it and burying it, as opposed to saying, okay, let me be kind to myself and understand why I'm burnt out, or why I have no patience today, or why I'm feeling really upset by this specific thing my child is doing, because that's where good growth happens.
Right. Right. And again, I think something, and this is, I work with so many clients and so many different factors on just this idea that being angry is an emotion. If you look at an emotion chart, right, there's happy, sad, angry, it's there. So why can we so happily accept happy? Why can we just say, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to be happy, and not accept anger, right? And sure, do you want to be yelling? Do you want to be hitting things? No. But a lot of times when we get to that point of yelling and, acting out, it's usually because we didn't address it earlier. We didn't allow ourselves to feel angry, right? And we're not protecting our kids by not having emotions in front of them. We're not, because what we're doing then is showing them you can't have emotions either. And when they get angry, the next time they get angry, they're not going to know what to do, because the only way we learn is through other people. So if you teach them, okay, I screamed, should not have screamed. You know what? I shouldn't have screamed. I need to take a couple of breaths, or I need to go into my room just for 5 minutes. I love you. It's not about you. I'm going to regulate myself because mommy shouldn't be screaming and mommy's angry. You're showing them, oh, okay, so if I get angry, I can do that same thing. I shouldn't yell, but if I do, I can also do these things to kind of bring my body down.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And it's really making me think of almost like backing all the way up and addressing a mindset thing in terms of relationships between, like you said before, like mothers and children, but also just person to person. Because I think most mothers think it's my job to figure out everything, figure out how this relationship is going to go well, figure out how to make my child successful, figure out this, figure out that. And it's so much pressure and it's so punishing again and so taxing. And what I would love for mothers is to, and it took me years to figure this out as a mother, to consider the relationship between myself and my child as an invitation for us to both grow and learn together. And now that doesn't mean we're on the same plane in terms of like, I'm not a child, I'm an adult, and that brings certain responsibilities and leadership. But how do we kind of back up as mothers and say, I'm going to think about this relationship as a co-learning environment and a co-regulation environment and like a mirroring environment where I can learn about myself just as much as I can be open and curious to learn about my child, and we can learn and grow together. How much does that come up in the work that you're doing with your clients? And like, I feel like, again, not their fault. It's just so hard for moms to think that way, because there is a portion of that is easing into the flow of that relationship that is not strong arming, it's not punishing, and it's not fixing.
Right, right. And that's, I think you've said a lot of important things. And I think, yeah, there's this idea that you are growing together, right? You've never been a parent to this child before, right? That's a huge thing that I think most parents don't tell themselves. Oh, well, my mom did it when she was 21 and she was fine. Okay, you're not your mom. And your mom wasn't parenting this kid. You are parenting this kid for the first time. There's going to be new experiences. And this is just something, again, it's human condition, and it's with kids or not with kids. It's just human to human. going back to this, what you're reacting to, right? A lot of what we're reacting to are these negative beliefs we hold and doesn't actually have to do with the behavior. So, I also give this example because it's funny, and I've given this to probably most of my clients, but I took my kids strawberry picking last year, and my son was 1.5, and my daughter, it's more about my son. My son was 1.5, and I thought it would be a really good idea. And I did it myself, and I felt really good. And I took him, and of course, what does a 1.5-year-old want to do? A 1.5-year-old wants to eat all the strawberries, which is fine. It really, in all honesty, it's fine, right? But he's eating them, and then he's eating some rotten ones. And then I'm looking around, and this is what's going through my head. He shouldn't be doing this. He shouldn't be doing this because kids should listen to their parents and because no one else is doing this. And what if they're going to be mad that he's doing this, right? So this is what's going on in my head. And my 1.5-year-old is eating strawberries because holy crap, like there's strawberries everywhere. I want to eat them. And so then I start getting dysregulated because I'm saying, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. And he starts seeing, oh, wait, mommy's starting to react. Now I'm going to get really upset because she's getting upset. Right. And again, didn't have to do with him, had to do with me and the beliefs that I had. And he had a full on ginormous meltdown. I mean, like squirting pouches at me. I had strawberry from head to toe. He like ripped my shirt open at one point because I was wearing a button down shirt, like all of this. And at one point I was able to say, oh, wait, it's the strawberries. He just wants strawberries. And once I was able to change that, I regulated myself enough that he was able to regulate himself. But again, what I was worried about and what I was getting upset about was not the fact that he was eating strawberries. It was the fact that I was worried that it wasn't the right thing to do, that we have to follow the rules, that maybe I'm not being a good enough mom. Why isn't this happening with somebody else? And that's just going to fuel my other feelings.
I love, love, love that example because that example is literally so much of parenting challenges, like in a little nutshell, because women especially are raised to be so externally motivated. We're literally like these hyper vigilant antennas around what is expected of us out in the world. And so kids, 1.5-year-olds are not concerned at all about like societal expectations, as they should not be, right? Like we objectively know that. But as moms, we have all the stuff that we're carrying, and then we wind up putting it on the plate for them. And I feel like that story you just shared too, it made me think about, because moms want practical solutions for how to get out of those pressures that we put on ourselves. And I heard from you that when you tapped into his experience, when you tapped into, well, he's just seeing all these beautiful strawberries and just wants to try them and taste them, and he's enjoying this, like that was a big key in like taking you out of all of the weight of all the pressures you were living under in that moment.
Right. It's actually this idea of non-resistance. There's a lot of different names for it. The Buddhists say non-resistance. There's, radical acceptance, but it's this idea of he's eating strawberries. I probably can't get him to stop eating the strawberries. He's probably also going to still have a tantrum because that's a lot of strawberries. It's going to make him not feel that good. Right. And so in that moment, I said, this is what it is. This is what it is. It's not favorable. Probably don't love it, but this is what it is. And instead, I need to just take care of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I took him out of the best thing I did, took him out of the strawberry patch. He was upset. He was dysregulated. I continued to regulate myself because I wasn't thinking, you're a bad mom. Look at everything that you're doing. Why is your kid acting so crazy? I was just saying, he wanted the strawberries and I took them away. And that really sucks. And this isn't going to last forever. And oh my God, I should probably button my shirt. And, and actually someone who ended up working there, it was this man that looked like Santa Claus, was like, can I hold him? Maybe he just needs, I have a way with kids. And I said, okay. And I
Love it.
calmed down, he calmed down, but I was in the moment. And I think that that is a big thing. I think when we find ourselves as moms being dysregulated, yes, obviously, like a screaming, tantruming child is going to get you just, you're going to feel it, but it's then the thoughts that come with it, right?
Yeah.
Why is this always going to happen? Am I doing something wrong as a mom? Why do I have the most difficult kid? This is always going to last. People are looking at us. Look at my friend, her kid isn't doing this. And a lot of times that's what we end up reacting to.
I love that, because also what I'm hearing is that it is this sort of vicious cycle, right? As women, as mothers, the more externally motivated we are, the more we're pulled away from our own center and our own knowing, right? So like in these moments, you were just in that strawberry picking moment, you were just pulled so outside of your center. And then once you centered in on like his experience, but yes, we still need to get out of this, right? Like this is not working, and kind of accepting that, receiving some support there when the man asked to hold your child, and coming into like kind of like the reality of what it is. But that helped you get back into your center, because I feel like so many women and mothers just feel that ongoing pressure to kind of like perform, and then we lose what we know to be true. And I notice this a lot with mothers with kids in school too, because we often, as women, think about school as this authoritative place. And then we think, well, whatever the teacher says, whatever the school says must be right. But like we lose our own authority in so many of these moments of, as the parent, as just a woman in the world, having this own authority around our own lives. And we are pulled off of our center. So I guess what I want to like weave us back to is also like this push and pull between mothers feeling really validated for everything that they're carrying and all the pressures that they have on them, because I feel like if I can't possibly give enough validation to mothers, right? Like it's a lot. But at the same time, what you were talking about, the ownership that you took in that moment with your son, it actually is so empowering. So it's not about saying you really messed up there by like trying to stop him from eating the strawberries, right? But instead it's saying, when I center on my own experience and I center on what I know to be true, and I take accountability and responsibility in these moments, I am back to my center and I feel empowered, and then I know what to do next. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because that balance between validation and also like taking accountability and responsibility so that you can feel like, hey, I got this, you know?
Right, right. Yeah. And again, I think it does keep going back to this idea of non-resistance, because
Mm,
non-resistance isn't just like, well, I'm just going to let it happen. It's okay, what do I have control over and what don't I have control over?
yes.
A lot of times we don't actually have control over the screaming child, right? And that's what we try to have control over. And when we try to control something we don't have control over, it's just going to make the situation worse. But when we talk about this idea of non-resistance, it's okay, this is happening. I have choices here. I can either fixate on it and say this is the worst thing ever and I don't know what to do, and I need to do this, I need to do that, or say, okay, this is happening. What do I need? Maybe I need to take him out of the strawberry patch. Maybe I need to stop forcing something that isn't actually needed. Maybe I need to take care of myself, right? When I was learning about non-resistance, I got the example of, somebody who was maybe wrongfully accused and is in jail, right? They can say, this is the worst thing. I hate this. I hate that I'm somewhere where I shouldn't be. And they would have every right to feel that way. Then the main difference is when you practice non-resistance, you say that. And instead of saying, well, I'm just not going to participate, like, F this, I'm not going to participate. I'm going to, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. It's okay. I'm here. I am here. I know shouldn't be here, but I am here. So what? What do I do now? How do I live in here? And so I think that that's what you're saying, is that we have to accept, like, that we are here and we have to do things to help us in this situation in the here and now. And I think also what leads to it is that a lot of parents, a lot of moms in particular, aren't aware of what they need or what they're part of it, right? Again, so many moms I speak to have said, like, oh yeah, I haven't showered in a few days, or I haven't eaten a meal, or like I don't take time to myself. They just come into the bathroom with me. And yes, I'm a mom and I have two young kids and I experience that too. But we have to take accountability that if we are not setting those boundaries, if we're not eating, if we're not drinking water, if we're not getting rest, it's going to affect us and we're not going to be able to regulate ourselves. So when our kid is screaming, if we haven't eaten, if we are, something's not taken care of, that's going to come up too. So we do have like the responsibility to take care of ourselves because then we can better take care of our kids.
Yeah. And I love this because it really plays into the work I do with parents so much is like looking at the behavior, right? So like, let's say a kid is hitting and we are like, okay, this is not ideal behavior. But if we keep trying to squash the behavior, we're not going to get to the heart of the issue, right? And it's the same thing with us. Like it's this pattern that I take them through with their children, but you have to get into the pattern with yourself too, which is exactly what you're saying, which is like, what's going on with me, right? Like, what are the underlying needs? What are the things that I'm not taking care of, or the like sort of mental health hygiene that I need to have so that I can XYZ, whether it's work your job or be a parent or, be a daughter or whatever it may be. Because like you said earlier in this episode, the societal pattern of like moms have to just deplete themselves completely, give everything to everyone else. And then if they're left over with a little breadcrumb, sure, they can give it to themselves. But I love how you brought up boundaries in this conversation, because what I talk to moms a lot about too is like, okay, we've got this scenario where there's a challenge, where something's happening. Like, what is your job here, right? Like, what is your job? What do you need? Is there something you need to teach here? Is there something you need to just allow to happen and remove yourself? So can you talk a little bit about boundaries and kind of how you teach that good boundary hygiene for mothers, like within their day-to-day lives? And boundaries need, again, to come from a place of like self-love.
Right, right. Well, I think a lot of it is this idea also of accepting suffering, and that I think a lot of us come from generations of moms that just accepted suffering and was just like, well, I'm going to deplete myself. I'm not going to meet my needs. I'm going to, and didn't set the boundaries there. And so because of that, had less of a like ability to handle hard things, right? And so boundaries, and I say this again, this can be for kids and this could be for, parent to parent, parent to friend, whatever, is that boundaries aren't no's. And a lot of times we don't want to set boundaries because we're afraid that we're telling someone no. And that's not what a boundary is. A boundary is, I need this. That's what a boundary is. And when we can reframe that, we're going to be more likely to say that. I ran a group for moms, and this was pretty astounding. But I said to moms, okay, how many of you all ask to go to the bathroom with your husband when you're with the kids? Every single one of them raised their hand. Same thing with taking a shower, anything. Every single mother raised their hand and said, yep, I ask. And then I said the opposite. How many of your husbands ask? And they didn't. Now, this isn't a fault of the husband, right? Necessarily. This is women not feeling like they can take up space, moms feeling everyone's needs are before mine, right? So if you feel like you have to ask to take care of yourself, you're going to also end up being resentful. You're going to be resentful to your partner. You're going to be resentful to your kids. You're going to, be sitting there during bedtime being like, oh my God, I haven't done laundry. I haven't eaten. I have had no time for myself. And you're going to rush through bedtime and your kid's going to feel it. And then, it's going to be this tackle because you're not taking care of yourself. You're not saying, this is what I need. You're not saying, I need 45 minutes to, do X, Y, and Z. Not,
Mhm.
can you give me 45 minutes? I need this. This is what I'm going to do. And I think that that's really important. Mommy needs to go to the bathroom by herself. That's something that I have two little ones. So I've
Yeah.
been really, really strict with, is that mommy needs to go to the bathroom by herself. And not only do they do that, but now they ask for that themselves, where they go to the bathroom and be like, I need privacy, right? They really mirror what you do.
Mhm.
And being able to really set boundaries, meaning set your needs, is going to change your capacity to handle hard things.
Yeah, if this episode does anything, I hope it gives mothers permission. Like, let's give them the universal permission so that they stop asking and understand how necessary it is to create those boundaries and create the space and show themselves and their child how to care for yourself. Because I think we tend to try to get kids to be super empathetic really early. We want them to exhibit patterns of empathy and caring for each other, which, yes, of course, we all need to do. And especially as parents, we are caregivers. But I think we skipped over the part where we really learned how to take care of ourselves properly. And what we don't want to do is skip our kids past that part. And
Right.
I think, like you're saying, like, I see so many moms who are like, I'm doing this, this, and this, and this for my kids. And it's almost like they're erasing themselves as a human, right? They're almost like, I'm this shell that takes care of this child, but like the kid is going to learn that too, right? And then the kid
Right.
can't grow with you because they don't feel like my mom doesn't have messy feelings. My mom doesn't have any, boundaries for herself. My mom doesn't take care of herself in any
Right.
important ways. So A, I'm not learning that, but B, I'm not learning that about the other person either, and how to kind of be in tandem with somebody who has healthy boundaries.
Right. And a kid is going to say, well, mommy always lets me go in the bathroom with her, and they're not going to stop. They're not going to create the boundaries for us. They're not going to sit and say,
Right.
mommy should probably be able to go to the bathroom by herself. They're going to say, well, mommy always let me,
Yeah.
or like, mommy always lets me wake her up in the middle of the night. She doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right. And this happened with my daughter because she was like, oh, well, you'll always wake up. And then we talked about it. And I said, but mommy needs sleep. And this is really important to mommy. And when mommy doesn't get sleep, then mommy isn't as good of a mommy.
Hmm.
And I need it just like you need it.
Right.
And we worked on it and there was a lot of other factors there. But now she'll even say, mommy, I woke up in the middle of the night and I had to go to the bathroom and I was going to wake you up, but I know that you needed to have your sleep. So I didn't wake you up. Right. And
That's sweet.
so
Yeah.
exactly. She's reading my boundaries. She's interpreting them. And then she can say things like that for herself. A lot of us grew up with moms that, we're like, oh yeah, my husband never changed a diaper. My husband never did this,
Yeah.
and they don't say it in a way of fact. They're saying it in a, well, I suffered, so should you. And there comes a time where someone has to stand up and say, why am I suffering this way? Do I
Hmm.
have to suffer this way? Is there a different way to do it?
I love that example you gave because I've thought of a few clients too who are like trying to get their children to sleep, for example, right? And like
Mhm.
young children, 4 years old, they want them to sleep independently. They're working so hard on it and they are over prioritizing the child's sleep and therefore sacrificing themselves by sleeping on the floor next to the bed. And that's just one of many examples of like, well, we're also teaching our child, like, yes, your sleep is important and it's my job to facilitate good sleep for you. But what that looks like is mom completely sacrificing her own sleep. And then I am also teaching you through that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're not teaching that sleep is important because you're not sleeping, but you're also saying like mommy doesn't need anything, right?
Yes.
Like mommy doesn't need to eat. And so then if you get to the point where you're like, oh, I just need to take a break, they're going to say, well, what? Why do you need a break? What does that mean? They're going to feel dysregulated by you not being there, by you taking time. Whereas like my kids, sometimes I'll say to them, mommy's going to take a mommy break for 5 minutes. I'm here. I'm okay, but I'm going to do it. And because I've set that boundary, they know. And the other day, my daughter, again, she's a lot. She's amazing, but she was like, she got upset and she goes, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a mommy break. And she went into her room. And how wonderful
Yeah.
is that? Right? Because I would have never been able to do that as a kid or understand that. I didn't understand that as an adult. I had to learn that.
Yes.
And it helps so much.
So I love this because let's translate this to emotions now, okay? Because
Mhm.
taking the boundaries and the permission for the space and the bathroom and, even that, like we talked about that hygiene, right? Of
Mhm.
for me, like I need to move my body in some way every day in order to be like a regulated,
Yeah.
halfway decent version of myself. Right. But like I
Mhm.
know those things about myself now at 49 years old that I didn't always know. But now, how do we do this with emotions? Because I feel like a lot of moms have a lot harder time sort of figuring out where that line is of like, what to allow with our children in terms of
Mhm.
emotions and what we can control, what we can't control. And then also our own emotions and how, just like we're talking about the sleep hygiene, how we don't negate our own human emotions and
Mhm.
show healthy versions of them, but also kind of like teaching ourselves those skills while we're teaching our child the skills. So talk a little bit about emotions and kind of what are the big bullet points that you use to kind of help people think about where that line is, because I find that a lot of mothers, including myself in early days, felt like it was my job to fix things if my kid was having hard feelings.
Right. Right. And so I'm gonna note on that because I think it's
Yeah.
really important. There is a child psychologist. His name is Dan Siegel, and he does a lot of other things besides being a psychologist. But he gives this example of like parents wanting to fix something, and what that does is it doesn't allow a kid to identify their emotion and feel safe within an emotion. Right? When you go straight to I need to fix it, you're telling your kid that's not a good emotion. Don't feel that. Right. And in turn, we're also saying that to ourselves. That's probably what we say to ourselves. And then a lot of parents are like, okay, well, I shouldn't cry in front of my kid. I shouldn't, get angry. And so what ends up happening is we fear things that we don't know. We fear the unknown. Something feels unsafe if we don't know, we've never experienced it before. Right. And so a lot of times what that means is that when you grow up in a family that doesn't go through emotions, I have so many clients that I speak to that I say like, well, how did your parents like experience anger? And they were like, they never did. We never
Mm.
saw it. Well, what about sadness? No, they never really were sad. And when I was sad, they were saying, oh, no, 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 it's not that bad. Feel better. Right. So if your parent does cry or does get angry, the fear response comes in because you're saying, wait, this never happened before. This feels unsafe. Or if you feel it yourself, oh, this feels unsafe. I shouldn't feel it. Right. And so with moms and with parents, what I say is if you're going to cry, obviously you don't want to be like, putting your emotions on your kids and having them caretake you. But, recently we had a loss in the family, and my husband and I decided that we were going to show our emotions in front of our kids, not because we wanted them to caretake us, but because we wanted them to see that one, we can be really, really upset and still be okay. And two, that like it's okay to feel really upset. And as a family, we can take care of each other. And again, that's the same thing with anger. I'll say, like, I'm really angry right now. I'm really frustrated right now. You know, I need to take a couple of deep breaths. And this is what I need to do for myself. Or like, I put on music and I'm showing the emotion is valid. It's okay. We all feel it. It's okay to have an emotion. And if you can feel it and go through the whole like arc of the emotion with your kid witnessing it, when they get angry or they get upset or an unsafe feeling comes up, they're going to remember, okay, well, mommy did this. Or mommy knows what it's like to feel upset. Maybe I can go to mommy and ask her how I'm doing.
I love this because I feel like this is a big key for growth in general, right? Is like, for example, going back to your strawberry example, one of the reasons why we shut things down so tight and follow so many rules is because we're trying to avoid
Mhm.
conflict or avoid feeling uncomfortable, right? Or
Mhm.
avoid like the
Mhm.
eyeballs on us. But real freedom and real growth comes from being free of that fear. right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I really feel like what you're saying is like so many moms wind up kind of creating scenarios where they can avoid uncomfortable feelings for themselves and for their children, right? And then they wind up being so dysregulated when their child does have an uncomfortable feeling, as opposed to like, you know what? I am not afraid of my uncomfortable feelings or difficult feelings. I'm going to embrace them. I'm going to, like you did with the loss in your family, really
Mm-hmm.
show kind of like moving through it. And then I really think it creates a lot of freedom in
Right.
your dynamic as a parent, in your place in the world as a woman, because you're just not running around trying to squash that out everywhere. And then thereby teaching your child, like, it's okay. Like you said, we can cry and we can be okay. We can feel the loss. We can feel the grief and we can be okay. And grief for a kid looks like not getting the lollipop that they wanted sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and that can
Right.
be real grief for them. And we don't want them to feel grief. We love them. We don't want them to be sad. We don't want them to feel that. But raising a person with a lifetime of avoiding those types of
Right.
feelings that are unavoidable is not, I think, what we really want to do objectively. So I just hear like one of those keys is really empathizing with yourself and saying like, yeah, this feels really uncomfortable right now, but like, I got this. I can do this.
Yeah, right. And emotions are called feelings because you feel them in your body. And I can't tell you how many adults I've said that to, and there was like, what? But it's true, right? We have emotions and we feel them in our body. And if we feel something in our body, it's a lot easier not to judge that, right? So, someone who's like, my heart is racing and I'm feeling really tight in my body. They don't necessarily judge that. But if they say, I'm feeling anxious, they're like, nah, I don't want to feel anxious. No, I shouldn't feel anxious. What. And so another thing is that it's turning your emotions into feelings, right? So the other day I like let out a really deep breath and I like did this with my shoulders. And my daughter turned to me and my son turned to me and they're like, are you okay, mommy? And I was like, you know what? I was feeling a little stressed. I don't know why. I'm just going to do this. It makes me feel better. And then they did it, right?
Mhm.
And for some reason, we're more willing to take care of our emotions when we look at them as feelings than emotions. And that's why I do a lot of body based therapy. But yeah, every emotion is valid. Even if, like, your daughter, I gave, God forbid, I gave my son a peeled banana instead of a one that was unpeeled.
How
And
could
he
you?
was so upset. And what I could have said is, oh, come on.
Right.
Like, whatever, who cares? I was chuckling to myself a little bit because it's really funny.
Mm.
But also, I was like, yeah, you're disappointed. You're disappointed that you didn't get what you wanted. I'm not going to change it. I'm not actually going to give you a banana that's unpeeled because also you're not going to peel it. But I'm going to say, it's okay. You feel frustrated with me. And instead of yelling at me, you can say, Mommy, I'm really mad. And I get it. And I'm sorry that I did that. Right.
Yeah.
And it's harder to do. But if he was started getting upset and then I started saying, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. I'm a bad mom. Why did I do this? Oh my God, here we go again. We're going to have to go to school in 5 minutes. And now we're going to be late because he's crying over a banana. And I'm just so tired. And why isn't my husband helping me? And all this, we're not going to be able to regulate ourselves and validate our kids' feelings.
No, this is so good. And like, it really is such gold what you said about the feelings and feeling it in our body, because that really is the litmus test for everything and helps bring us back to ourselves and our own experience, and also helps us teach our children, that feelings do come up, but then there's certain things we do something about it. And then there are other times where we feel the feeling and understand that like there isn't a fix. This is not supposed to be fixed. This is just part of the human experience. And that's just such a beautiful message and also guide, I think, for mothers in navigating all of this. I feel like you and I could talk for hours and hours and hours.
Absolutely.
And everything you say just has so much value for the mothers listening. And I want to get into a whole other episode with you about a lot of the body-based work that you do, because I think many women feel really outside of their bodies through their life experience, and coming back to our bodies and back to our own emotions is really such a beautiful start for being able to have healthy growth within these relationships. So thank you for joining me today. And please, I'm going to add it to the show notes, but tell everyone where they can find you.
So I have a website. You can look at me. I think the website is in the show notes. That is how you can find my phone number. That's how you can message me. I would love to speak to whoever wants to speak to me. I'm licensed in Connecticut and New York. So I can also, if therapy is what you're looking for, I can see you if you're in New York or in Connecticut. And then I also have an Instagram page, your underscore therapist underscore Arielle. And I do a lot of like regulation type stuff on there. Some tips about being a parent, sometimes not ever having to do with being a parent, but really this body based understanding and really accepting what your body is going through.
I love that. It sounds like beautiful work. And I think every mom can really benefit from, giving themselves some love and compassion that they so badly want to give their kids, but they have such a hard time giving it to themselves. And it can be truly profound how much healing can happen through that. So thank you again for being here with me, and we'll have many more conversations to come.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.